Welcome to the Leaderish Podcast with your hosts, Regina and Doris. Doris, how's it going?
Hey, Regina. It's going very well. How about you?
Going great. Looking so forward to our conversation today around dealing with difficult people. The reason I'm so excited for it is because you have gone on nonstop about the let them theory. And even though I haven't read the book yet, I do have it downloaded. I just haven't had a chance to read it. But even though I haven't read it yet, I feel like I know the book. And also I feel like I know Mel Robbins, personally, one-on-one. So I'm super excited to talk about the book and some ways that we can deal with difficult people, incorporating the let them theory, but also talking about the different types of difficult people.
Yeah, and I think that book really inspired today's conversation. I finished the book last week and I blogged about it last week, and I was at a networking event just at lunch today, was talking about the let them theory then, and every time I run into someone that hasn't heard of it or maybe has heard of it a little bit, I love sharing my thoughts and insights about it. And I just thought it was a great conversation. Not that the let them theory is about difficult people, because it's not. It's really more about difficult situations as well as difficult people, or maybe people that you love and you're in a difficult situation. So it could be a family dinner, it could be a group project, it could be your boss, it could be somebody reporting to you, or it could just be maybe a friend or someone you thought was a friend. And it's really dealing about people and situations, and really not letting those situations or those people derail you. And so this just seemed like a really timely topic. I know that we're all dealing with somebody in our lives that is creating a difficult situation, or maybe the scenario is difficult. And so I just thought it was a great topic, and I was super excited that you agreed, and let's get into it.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about Mel's book. I bet that a lot of you that are listening right now, you've probably heard about it or you've listened to her podcast, but Doris has this new passion and firsthand experience. So Doris, I'm going to ask you to just tell us a little bit about the let them theory and what's behind that.
Yeah. So the book is, as I said, it's really about not letting situations and people kind of clutter your mind. And here's some words. These are directly from the book. So the core concept is that let them clears away the noise and makes room for your voice, your intuition, and your truth. And there are two important parts of this book too. Let me back up for a second. So and the blog that I talked about last week was 4 words that changed my life. So the 4 words are let them and then let me. So let them is all about letting the person, the situation happen. So you can get frustrated about it, you can get angry, you can get emotional about it, but then hopefully 90 seconds later, you can take some deep breaths, calm down, and not let it derail who you are or how it impacts your life, especially if you can't control that person or that situation. And so you let them you say let them. So you can have whatever scenario you can come up with that frustrates you. And I'm sure our listeners right now can think of a person or a situation that is really frustrating them, but that they have no control over. Okay, so let it sit for a second. And if you have no control over it, let it happen. You're not responsible for other people's emotions. You're only responsible for how you respond to them. So the second part of the theory is let me. So you let them, let the situation happen, let the person say something nasty to you, but then you let me, or you let yourself manage that situation. So it's how you behave and how you react to that situation is the second part of that theory. So it's all about owning your power and your energy. And you mentioned that everyone knows Mel Robbins and you feel like you're her best friend. I think she has that air about her, that energy about her, is that she truly does. When you listen to her podcast or when you read the book, you just feel like you're one of her best friends. And when you do read the book, you realize that she's had a lot of challenges. She's had a lot of situations with friends or with family where she wasn't the nicest person to be around. And she talks about what a terrible parent she was in her 20s or what a terrible friend she was. And looking back at the situation, she thinks, I wouldn't want to be my own friend. And so she has been able to take all of that experience and put it into this theory she created with a conversation she had with her daughter. And the conversation was around, and I think it was something about prom and where people wanted to go out to eat or something, and she was trying to control the situation. Her daughter just looked at her one day and said, will you just let them eat where they want to eat and stop worrying about it? That started the let them theory. And she talked about it. I'm sure she podcasted about it or maybe spoke from the stage before she wrote the book with her daughter. And it turned into this universal or worldwide book club. And she even talks about that in one of her podcasts, is that it is such a popular book that so many book clubs are talking about it. My neighborhood book club is going to talk about it in July. I'm going to lead the discussion in July when we talk about the let them theory. So I could go, as you can tell, I'm very passionate. I could go on and on and on about it, but I don't want to derail the conversation about the podcast. I'd like to move forward, and maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the difficult people that we all face in our lives.
Well, I love this. And I just want to go back to something that you said. You were so passionate. I did not want to interrupt you. But one of the things that you said that hit me like a ton of bricks was that you can't control their emotions. Mm-hmm. All you can control is how you react. Now, we've talked about this, I think, probably 10 times on our podcast, yes. And it keeps coming up over and over. I talk with clients about it all the time. What can you do in this situation? How can you control yourself? Because you can't control other people. So I love this. And it takes us really well into talking about the different types of difficult people. And what do we mean by difficult, right? Because I think we typically think about the jerk next door. Or we think about, the ugly person who's trolling you on social media or whatever, right? We think about those people as the jerks, but there are some other difficult people out there. There's the passive people, right? The people who won't respond even if you need something or you ask them for something. There are people who are overly emotional. Everything comes with big emotions. And then you feel like you need to control the situation and control their big emotions, but they're their emotions. It's okay. There's others who are resistant to change. If you're thinking about working with somebody on a project and they just don't want to do it different, right? These are all difficult people. Some of them are loud, some of them are rude, some of them are quiet. Some of them do things behind your back. Sometimes they do things and you don't even know about it until weeks later, right? So I think it's pretty common to have different types of difficult people in your life. And if you're listening right now and you're thinking, I don't have anyone difficult in my life, can you just pause this episode for just a second? Because you do. I know you do. Think of the person. We all do. So we've kind of defined difficult, but what we've done is we've scoured the internet. By the way, do you know that there are 50,000 different models for archetypes for difficult people? I mean, it's insane. Doris and I have kind of put together 5 that we run into often. So we'll just talk about those 5, but there are tons of different ones out there. And we also, in preparation for today's episode, had a heck of a lot of fun finding people in pop culture. So in movies or TV shows that you will recognize immediately when I say their name. So we did some really good work on this, and boy, we had fun. So if any of these resonate with you, please send us a message. We want to talk about it. We want to hear if we nailed it for you or if there's a better archetype out there. I'm going to start with the Bulldozer. So we talked about archetypes. Doris, who is our archetype that we chose for the Bulldozer?
Miranda Priestley.
You are correct, ma'am. Ding, ding, ding. Okay, so here's what I love about this. Miranda dominates every single conversation. I mean, she ends conversations with, "That's all." Dominates every single conversation. She steamrolls others.
So Regina, but just in case someone hasn't seen the movie.
No.
Just in case.
No, come on.
Just in case.
The Devil Wears Prada.
Well, you and I have seen it a million times, but we may have some listeners who aren't familiar with Miranda Priestley, and she represents someone in real life too.
She does. The lady who ran Vogue, right?
Yes.
What was her name?
And I can't think of her name.
Let's not say her name. That could be like slanderous.
Yeah,
let's not do that. Let's just talk
that.
about Miranda and the character in The Devil Wears Prada. And she is this big editor for this really important fashion magazine. So you can only imagine the power and control that she feels like she has over fashion. So that's kind of who Miranda
and
is.
over the people that are in the office, the little people, as she might see them in the office.
Oh yeah, for sure. And when we think of the Bulldozer, when we think about Miranda, these are the people that just like, they might say things like, "Let's just get this done. I don't have time for debate." Or, "I don't want to listen to you. I don't need to listen to you. I know what we're going to do. Let's go do it."
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah.
I think I told you yesterday in preparation for this call that I have once been accused of being this archetype. Yes, believe it or not, I have been accused of being a bull in a china shop, as my manager once told me. And he was counseling me because I was kind of like a dog on a bone. I did not want to let go. I had an idea. I thought it was the best idea in the world. And I was one of those little people. It was I still remember the meeting. It was with some senior executives. And I thought I had a great idea, and they didn't think it was such a great idea. They were way over me, over my head. And I would not give up. And it was after the meeting, my manager came to me and said, "Doris, sometimes you need to be okay with letting go and let them." Before the let them theory ever existed, I needed to let those senior executives say what they wanted to say and be okay with it, and walk out of the meeting with my idea not having been taken seriously. And I learned from that. And months later, the same manager said, "You did a much better job." I would still present ideas, but I would realize if they were met with resistance that I calmed that idea down. And I stepped away from the idea. I didn't hang on to it for dear life as I had in the past. So I think a bulldozer can do that as well.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that very personal example. That was beautiful. Thank you. The next on our list is the victim. Now, these are the people that they're like, I mean, we kind of talked about Eeyore, but we really came up with a better archetype. But they're the ones that's like, nobody ever listens to me anyway. Nobody cares. I didn't know. Maybe resistant to feedback. They don't want to hear things, right? Who did we come up for our archetype for this one?
George Costanza.
Okay, so I'm not going to make the mistake again. He's in Seinfeld. If you exist today on this planet and you haven't watched an episode of Seinfeld, please go watch an episode of Seinfeld. George takes naps under his desk. I mean, nothing's ever his fault. Even the smallest thing will set him off in a whirlwind. So George is definitely the victim, always like thinking about what his lack of accountability is versus his accountability. It's always someone else's fault when it comes to George. I could only imagine, and I wish they had done an episode on this, of a performance review conversation with George, because I don't think that they have an episode on that, but wouldn't that be hilarious with a performance review for George?
Well, I think it could be pretty predictive that he wouldn't agree with anything that his manager said.
Oh, absolutely.
He would think that he was the star performer and would not agree when the manager said, "Well, you fell short here, here, and here."
Yeah.
And this might be pretty relatable to some of our leaders who listen to this podcast too, Regina, as they think about some of the people that they have to do a performance review for.
Yep.
And that person, so I remember my old company, the performance review, they went to a new platform, and you were able to rate yourself in, 10 different areas on how you were on leadership or how you were on projects or whatever. So you could rate yourself, and then your manager went behind you and would then share how he or she felt about that same area and your performance. And a lot of times we feel, and it could go either way. We can either be very humble and say, oh, no, I'm not good at all. And the manager can come back and say, oh, no, you're great. Or we can be like George Costanza and think, no, we are fabulous in every single area. We're a 10 out of 10. And the manager might come back and say, well, not so much. You were, in this area, you might have hit a 9, but here in this other area, you might have been a 2 or a 3. And we got to work on that.
Yeah, and I could see George receiving the feedback that he needed, that he didn't meet an expectation. I could see him saying, well, I didn't know that was the expectation. Nobody told me that was the expectation. If someone had told me, then I would have done it.
Oh my God. Perfect. There's perfect George right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, love the victim. Actually, really, I struggle with victims. If you want to know, they're the ones that I struggle with the most. So I don't consider myself a victim. I consider myself crazy accountable. And so when I notice people who shirk accountability or don't take accountability for their own actions, then I very much struggle with that. They're probably my most difficult. But let's take a look at the third one. The third one on our list is the ghoster. These are the people, their catchphrase is nothing. They just don't say anything. They don't respond to the text or the email or even the conversation that's in the room. They just get really quiet. They avoid conflict. They avoid responsibility. They get really quiet when things get hard. Who did we choose for our archetype here?
Ferris Bueller.
From Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Bueller. Love it. Yeah, I love Ferris. Ferris was so good-hearted. This was actually hard for me because I adore Ferris, right? He had the best heart and he cared about his friends so much. But if you think about him and Cameron in Cameron's garage and they're running the car in reverse to try to get the miles that they used on his dad's sports car to go down, which that doesn't work. And then it comes off the jacks and it goes out the garage. And Ferris pretty much is like, not my problem. Yeah. And Cameron is like freaking out, right?
Yeah.
And so that was like one of the only things in the movie where I was like, meh. But he just didn't take the responsibility and avoided all conflict, no matter who that conflict was throughout the whole movie. In fact, he would turn conflict into something fun and funny instead of having a hard discussion.
Absolutely. I can imagine this person being the one. So you're in a group project meeting and they're probably playing a game on their phone or they're on social media rather than even paying attention to what's happening in the meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that happens. And I think also sometimes these people will be in the meeting and they'll be listening and they have thoughts or they want to address something and they just choose not to.
I think these are the people you've got to call on. You've got to, Bueller, what are your thoughts on this?
That's right.
And you got to kind of ask them to participate or they won't.
That's right. Yeah, so the next archetype that we came up with was the know-it-all. And these are very smart people. In fact, we need folks that are smart around us every day. They're the ones that have really great ideas from themselves, but they are resistant to other people's ideas. They also are very dismissive when other people have ideas, and they can be patronizing and condescending. They say things like, I've been doing this a long time, and let me tell you how it actually works. So similar to the Bulldozer, but a little bit different. Who did we choose for our archetype here?
Possibly my favorite show on the planet, The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon Cooper.
Okay, so mine too. And you and I talk about Big Bang Theory quite often.
We do.
Actually, a friend of mine got me a onesie for my oldest when he was a baby that said rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. Now, some people won't get that But if you know The Big Bang Theory, you get it immediately. And still one of my favorite shows out there. And Sheldon was one of my favorite people, even though he was a know-it-all. They really made him into a very lovable character, didn't they?
They absolutely did. Yeah, I can't play rock, paper, scissors. It almost sounds like something's missing when someone
well,
says
it
that.
is. Lizard and Spock are
Absolutely.
missing. I love it. I love it. You know, sometimes you see these folks in like your projects or your meetings. Sometimes you have them working for you. Sometimes you see them in a church group or whatever. And it's frustrating because we all want to be able to collaborate and share experiences. But when we have a know-it-all around us, they really do shut down collaboration with other people, kind of like how Sheldon would only sit in the same place of the couch, nowhere else. If you were in his spot, that was not okay. That was not even thinkable.
No, unless it was his Meemaw, then it was okay.
That's true. Okay, so the last one is our chronic complainer. Now, you know these people, they're negative about everything. They always find problems. But boy, when you ask them to come up with a solution, they sure can't find one. And these are the type of people that say things like, well, if you had just asked me first, none of this would have ever happened.
Oh, yeah. And I love another favorite group of movies, C-3PO.
I love it. Yes.
When that archetype came up, I had to laugh out loud on that one because you wouldn't think about it offhand, but
that's right.
If you thought about it a little bit more deeply, you realized C-3PO did a whole lot of complaining. For a non-human, a lot of complaining.
I know. And aren't robots supposed to just be very agreeable? But C-3PO never agreed with anything. It was just constant complaining, very few solutions. R2-D2 always had the solutions. And C-3PO just sat there and complained about everything and worried. I mean, the worry and anxiety in that robot are still overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
So, well, this has been fun talking through these 5 different types of difficult people and the archetypes that we came up with. Gosh, I loved that so much. But I also want us to talk about some strategies on how to deal with these difficult people. Most of these strategies are going to work no matter who your difficult person is. And before we kind of get into this, one of the things that I thought of when you were talking about Mel Robbins and her daughter kind of having a conversation and Mel saying, hey, just let them. And that's how the let them theory
the daughter said it.
The daughter said it.
The daughter said it. So Mel was getting frustrated. Mel was the one that was trying to push for her thoughts and her ideas. And it was her daughter, her young daughter. I think it was, if my memory is correct, it was a prom conversation. So the daughter would have been maybe 17, 18, 19 in that area, and said, Mom, just let them. Let them go to eat where they wanted to eat. Because I think she wanted them to eat at a fancy restaurant, and they wanted to go to some taco place. And they're in their prom dresses. And the daughter said, just let them go to the taco place.
I love it. Yeah, I didn't realize that. I must have missed that somewhere. Thank you for helping me with that. And my example is kind of the opposite. My son was having trouble with teacher, which happens all the time when you are in elementary school. There are constant difficulties with teachers and children. And one of the things that we were talking about is he was like, she doesn't hear me. She doesn't hear me. And I said, well, did you hear her though? Well, yeah, she said this and this and this. I said, but did she feel like you heard her? Because to me, it doesn't sound like she actually felt like you heard her. And if you had said, Miss So-and-so, I see exactly where you're coming from and what I did in this situation. And I'd like for you to know that my intention was this, not that. If you had let her know that you hear her, she may have been more open to the conversation. And I think for a lot of these difficult people, a lot of it is they just want to be heard. People want to be heard, Doris.
Oh, they do. They absolutely do. Even the quiet ones. Even the Ferris Buellers still want to be heard.
Yes, absolutely. Even the ghoster. That's probably why they're ghosting, is because they weren't heard. They probably took an opportunity to speak up and they weren't heard. And now in their brain, they're just saying, well, it's not worth it.
Yeah, they shut down.
Not worth it to speak up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and they shut down. So I think a lot of these behaviors that we have talked about in our archetypes come from not being heard. So I wanted to kind of start there. And then now let's go into some of the things that's good to know, but let's go into some of the things that we can actually do, some of the strategies. You want to go over the first one?
Yeah, the first one, don't personalize it. This is where the let them theory is so powerful, is when you do run into one of these 5 archetypes and you feel like that they're stabbing you either in the front or the back. They're not. It's just who they are. It's who their personality is. And let them have that personality. Now, if it's toxic, if it's dangerous, if you're in a work situation that needs to be handled using HR, we're not talking about those extreme situations. Really today, we're talking about the more subtle situations. So allowing them to have their personalities and not taking those statements, those comments or non-comments or looks personally. So let them behave the way they want to behave. And one of the things that as we researched it, a lot of times difficult behavior is rooted in insecurities or fear. And so that may be where they're coming from. Their know-it-allness or their bullying or even their quiet attitude might be coming from a place of fear. So pausing and really trying to, and so in the book talks about 90 seconds. When you're frustrated, and we've also talked about the breathing techniques and the box theory. So if you just pause, and maybe it's not a full 90 seconds can seem like a lot, but if you can pause even 30 seconds and take a step back and then start the conversation, maybe with a fresh mindset and saying things like, hey, you know what? It sounds like that's really important to you. Can you help me understand where you're coming from, or where that idea is coming from, or where that inspiration or passion is coming from? I don't fully understand it. Can you please share a little bit more about where you're coming from?
I love that. Yeah. And it's going back to being heard. I told you, most of this is going back to being heard. And so letting them have space to be heard, but also letting you not personalize it.
Yeah.
I love
What's our second one?
Okay, so our second one is around setting boundaries and setting those boundaries early. Okay, so let's talk about the bulldozer, for instance. We can do this with all of them, but let's just use the bulldozer in this example. Your bulldozer is like, nope, we're going to do it this way. We're going to do it my way. Move on. We're not talking about it. If you notice those things, then you can simply be direct and be kind and say something like, one of the things that I really love about working on this project is that we're going to collaborate together. And I really expect for us to all collaborate, meaning that everyone's voice is heard and we all talk about it together to figure out what is the best way forward. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, that sounds great to me, Regina.
I love it.
I have a question for you, though. So going back to our bulldozer example, Miranda Priestley. So she's the CEO, the president. So if you're dealing with the CEO that has made this statement, and you are maybe a manager or a director, you're not even at that senior, you're not even at the C-suite level, and you're having a conversation, and the CEO is so combative. And I know you said set boundaries early, but how would you manage, or maybe you don't? Maybe that's that time that you just step back and you say, well, if the CEO is going to be that bullying, I'm just going to have to take it. Do you have any advice on that?
Wow, that's really, really hard. But there is one thing that I think I would like to say to that. First of all, I can't tell you in this hypothetical situation if you should call out your CEO. I can't do that. My last company, there's no way in hell I would have called out the CEO. I would have probably turned into the ghoster and just been like, silence. However, I have learned throughout my life that people are just people, and really how much they get paid or what their title is really doesn't matter all that much. People are people. And so if someone is going to be mean or rude to me, even if it is the CEO, I'm probably not going to take that. Now, I'll share with you one other thing. I did have a boss at one point in time who this is hard to tell. I was in her office and she was just being really rude to me. Very disrespectful, raised her voice. I had done what I felt was some really good work. She did not feel like it was good work. And instead of like helping me through that, she was berating me. And I actually stood up in her office and I said, I am not going to have this conversation with you in this way. When you're ready to have a different conversation with me, I'd be happy to do that.
Oh, good
and
for
I
you.
turned around and walked out.
Oh, good for you.
It took every drop of emotional control for me to do that in a direct, kind, and professional way. Because really what I wanted to do is I wanted to get defensive and I wanted to spring expletives all over the place. Like I wanted to spew them out of my mouth. And I did not. I set that boundary. And because I set that boundary, conversations like that did not happen again with me.
That's great. Yeah.
There are, and I've set many boundaries in my life. Like this is not the only time I've set a boundary. I probably wouldn't have done that with my last CEO at my last organization, but I have done it with clients when there was a boundary and there was some bulldozing going on and set a boundary about how I like to work.
Yeah. Another way to make, because I think there are a lot of people that wouldn't have the courage that you had. Another example could be, because you mentioned ghosting, it could be standing up and walking out. That could set a tone, even without saying a word, that could set a tone to say, I can't sit in this room and be berated this way, and just walk out and maybe not say a word.
I think a follow-up conversation would need to happen afterwards because if you don't state your intention with walking out, then the people that observed this could imply intention in that situation. Maybe you just had to go to the bathroom. Yeah. And so having that conversation is going to be important. And I think that's the whole point of boundaries. Boundaries is about having a conversation on what you will be okay with and what you won't be okay with. And most of the time, I'm not going to say all the time because some people are just jerks, but most of the time, if you set a boundary, most people will actually try to maintain that boundary. And if they slide a little bit, just remind them and move them back to where they need to be.
Very true. Very true. I like that.
Now, our third one, you've already alluded to this just a little bit. So why don't you go over our third one?
Managing your own triggers. So this is that emotional awareness, being aware of yourself and being aware of where you are in the moment. So the example you just gave, you completely understood where you were in the moment. You stayed grounded. You controlled the tone on how you responded to that manager. You could feel your heat rising, but I bet you breathed. I bet you took a couple of breaths before you shared those words, and you responded with respect. And I think that example you just gave is a perfect example of managing your own triggers. And I know that we can all get upset. We can feel our blood pressure rising. We can feel the desire to share expletives and call people names, or maybe even get on social media and get ugly on social media. But we have to manage that. We manage our own triggers. And it's in some ways, it's a little bit like boundaries, but they're the boundaries within yourself.
Right.
And understanding where your boundaries are and knowing that when you come close to your own boundaries, that you need to take a step back and, again, using those breathing techniques, trying to get yourself under control.
Yeah, and most times we don't actually recognize the emotions that we have in the moment that we're having the emotions. I know for the last 3 episodes I've brought this up. I'm going to bring it up again. It's the How We Feel app. And it just asks you several times a day, how are you feeling when you're not even thinking about your emotions? Mm-hmm. And it is absolutely fascinating to understand your emotions at a deeper level. So even if you stop, like I don't necessarily fill out the form that comes with the app every day, but I do pause and think about what emotions am I experiencing in this moment? Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting. I mean, I could be deep in work and I'm like, oh, wow, I'm tense and I'm, low energy and I'm frustrated. I didn't even know I was frustrated. Yeah. So managing your own triggers, understanding how it feels when your blood pressure rises, when you are frustrated, anxious, whatever those triggers are for you, make sure that you're tuned in to those triggers. Mm-hmm. I think it's important.
And I know a lot of people talk about journaling, and yes, I have a gratitude journal, but I spend maybe seconds on it a day versus I feel like I should spend at least 5 to 10 minutes a day doing journal work where I'm kind of like the app, except I'm writing down the experiences. What is happening in the moment? What am I experiencing? What am I feeling? And how am I reacting to that? But it's all a level of self-awareness. And I think we as a human race I think the world would be a better place if we all were a little bit more self-aware of our own emotions and how we react to things.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought up your gratitude journal because it's not an episode without your gratitude journal. And I feel like it's going to not be an episode without me bringing up the How We Feel app by Yale. So, I mean, I just think that these are the things that we do. We talk about gratitude journals and the How We Feel app. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's do one more. Let's do one more strategy and then let's wrap this up. So I will say that the last strategy, and I think that this is important if you're in a corporate workspace, is knowing when to escalate and knowing when to exit. So not every situation can have a solution or can be fixed. Sometimes you need backup. So you can't just go with the let them theory in every situation. And this is what I need you to hear, especially if you're in a corporate environment. Yeah. If somebody grabs your bottom, that is not a let them. That is not a situation where you just say, let them. No, it's not okay. If somebody crosses your personal boundaries, if somebody says or does something that is racist or really mean or hateful or is bullying you, then those are things that do need to be escalated. But as Doris said before, you also can just get up and walk away. So make sure that you keep notes on patterns because that's really what we're looking for here when we determine if we escalate or we exit a situation. If you're seeing a pattern, you probably need to escalate, especially if you're in a corporate environment. If maybe you've just seen something happen once or you've experienced it once, maybe you just exit and you leverage the let them theory.
Mm-hmm. Well, and keep in mind, the let them theory doesn't say all bad behavior is acceptable.
Correct.
The let them theory is more about how you react to that behavior. So if someone does something that inappropriate, they grab your behind in your example, you still can't change that behavior, but you can go to HR. Right.
That's right. Because you're let them play grabby butt, but let me go to HR and handle this.
Absolutely. So you still have a lot of power and control.
That's right.
But what you don't want to do is, let's say, go in the parking lot and slash their tires, or taking it to another level where your behavior is just as bad as their behavior. Let them have that bad behavior, and then if it's bad enough, maybe they go to jail, maybe they're terminated. Whatever the consequences are that are appropriate for that really bad behavior needs to happen. And you do whatever is in your power and your control to make that happen.
That's right.
So you go to HR and hopefully that person will be terminated.
All right. Well, we've talked about the Let Them Theory book. We've talked about our 5 different personalities or archetypes. We had Miranda, George, Ferris, Sheldon, and C3PO. What I'd like for you to do, listeners, right now is think about who is your most difficult person. Is it a Miranda, a George, a Ferris, a Sheldon, or a C3PO? And then I want you to think about the four strategies, that we reviewed today, and think about what strategy might be best to handle that person. And I will also say, maybe if you don't succeed the first time, try again. Try a different strategy. All right. Doris, anything that you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
I want to hear from our listeners. I would like them to really hear that question you just asked and leave a comment or send us an email at leaderish@gmail.com and let us know how you thought about this episode and if you were able to use what you heard to help you with a difficult person. We want to hear your stories.
Yeah, we do. And our email is leaderishpodcast@gmail.com.
So sorry.
It's totally okay, Doris. I just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out, leaderishpodcast@gmail.com, because we love hearing from you. We love hearing from you. We also love your 5-star reviews. So if you haven't given us one, or if you haven't given us one in a while, and you keep hanging on episode after episode and listening to us, please give us a 5-star review. If your podcast listening thing allows you to leave comments, leave a comment. I know Apple Podcast does. And we would really be grateful if you did that.
And share this episode too. Share it with someone that maybe you know is having some trouble with a difficult person.
Yes. Yeah, because every time you share it, it actually boosts the algorithm so that we can show up on more, I don't know what they call it. What do they call that?
We'll say platform.
Well, yeah, but like when they recommend the recommended podcasts. Yeah, sure. Something like that. Like that when you go into your podcast listening thingy that we were talking about, then it says there's an area that says like recommended for you.
All those technical terms thingy.
Yeah, those technical terms. And so when you share, then we show up on other people's recommended areas in their podcast listening thingy. Anyway, Doris, great episode today. I'm loving it. I'm ready to go out and tackle difficult people.
Me too.
So I'll end us today with a big cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.